months back, I finally got around to watching a film I have heard quite a few reviewers praise before, but had just never seen myself. I had only become a casual Tom Cruise fan in the last few years, so this one was on my list to watch, and looking back, I'm really glad I made the time. Edge of Tomorrow is amazing, not only because it tells a story that is a fresh take on the Groundhog Day storyline, not only because the tech in it is cool or the aliens are very difficult to overcome, but because the characters in it are just plain awesome. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt play Bill Cage and Rita Vertasky, an unbelievably awesome duo who constantly have to deal with time travel and piece together a puzzle about their enemies' locations and weaknesses in order to find the source of the aliens' control and power and save the rest of their fellow soldiers from a war that would have inevitably wiped them out. And despite the fact that Tom Cruise is the main character, Emily Blunt's Rita is by far the most interesting thing in that movie. She's a woman with an enormous amount of skill and a great deal of prestige given what she's been able to accomplish in her battles. She has a lot of respect from her fellow soldiers, she's no nonsense and driven, but the movie doesn't go out of its way to force-feed the audience the idea that she is better than all the males, and explains, not in a condescending way, why her skills have changed and evolved beyond her peers. And it's great! Even though Rita is in a position of authority over Cage for almost all of the movie, she never feels condescending or patronizing. She never humiliates him or goes out of her way to assert some sort of dominance over him. She's a stoic and fierce character, but you can feel how driven she is to find a solution and end the war, and she isn't afraid of dying in order to do that. In short, Edge of Tomorrow is a totally awesome and underrated movie that is equal parts hilarious and nail-biting, and you should definitely go watch it. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen where a female is in authority over a male and it doesn't make me want to pull my hair out. And I began to realize that while we've been inundated with female characters who are literally all the same in the last few years, there are many ways in which these characters are vastly different from the good versions of the female characters beyond just the superficial stuff. Underneath all the narcissism and combativeness and the anger at everyone and everything, there's a lot of reasons why most blockbuster females are so despised and why we happen to love the good ones, old and new, so much. And though there's going to be a lot of Disney examples in this video, there are quite a few others who make the cut for the bad writing list. As a woman, I can safely say that a lot of my fellow female characters have been done an egregious disservice in the last few years because we have been painted in the worst lights possible in media. Maybe it's because the writers of these characters don't understand women. Maybe it's because they don't understand human psychology on a fundamental level. Maybe they're operating from some strange utopianist mindset, or maybe they just don't know how to write. Regardless, female characters have been very poorly written, and despite the differences in character and the plots that surround them, there are some universal ways in which these bad female characters are the same. One of the first is the reason that many female characters these days feel very combative. They are constantly defensive and on edge about the intentions of others. They see problems where none exist, pick fights where they don't need to, and always act as if they have something to prove. The Disney live-action movies are especially guilty of this problem, as almost all of their princesses have been written to stand on their own 2 feet and prop themselves up rather than relying on others. If you watch these films, there is an inherent difference between these characters and the others in the films. They need to prove something constantly, whether that is their independence, their need for autonomy, their desire or search for power, or even just to make other characters see that they aren't weaklings. Most of the time, this manifests in these characters being physically strong or skilled in some way and chafing against other characters throughout the story as they try to keep up with her. The constant friction becomes tiring to watch and results in the character only having people who will endorse her behavior and act like enablers, cheering her on. Her attitude is never checked by others, and in fact, she receives a lot of encouragement to continue acting in a way that would separate her from friends or other meaningful relationships. There is nothing to drive her beyond her own need to be better than others and show up the haters, so her character arc becomes exhaustive and boring. Oftentimes, the writing for the female character being combative can evolve into the female character being a straight-up sycophant with no morality and a completely lackadaisical attitude towards the well-being of others. This attitude is often rooted in selfishness, with the writing causing the female character to commit crimes like murder, mind enslavement, genocide, or else just straight-up unnecessary violence. They don't really care about who they hurt or who gets in their way so long as they get out of it, usually in the bloodiest, most gruesome way possible. Sometimes the writing even has them be proud of what they are doing and calling it simply collateral damage. This is the writing for a supervillain. When a character demonstrates their lack of morality or even a basic misunderstanding of right and wrong through their words or actions, and writing would have us believe that she remains somehow a hero and a good person, this is not a character that is worth watching or is well written. Oftentimes, the actions are excused away and the characters dismissed rather than being harshly reprimanded by someone else or feeling the real-world consequences of their actions. They don't experience repercussions, so it makes them both infuriating and unrealistic, because for every action, there is always an equal and opposite reaction. The writing allows them to experience next to nothing of the things they should face for their crimes or sins, and lets them off, sometimes with a warning, sometimes with nothing at all. The logical conclusion of a character committing a crime, any crime, would be for them to serve some sort of prison sentence and make some sort of restitution. The real world is bad enough with people not being properly brought to justice to see it happen all the time in storytelling as well. It's hard to believe that this ongoing narrative that all female characters are powerful and perfect and simultaneously reach the conclusion that anything they do is good no matter what, even murder. With that in mind, we can talk about the ongoing trend of characters having skills and abilities that we didn't see them get. Maybe one of the best examples of this is Rey Palpatine, who I refuse to call Skywalker because it is an insult. Her character arc, or lack thereof, is maybe some of the laziest storytelling I have ever seen. She somehow has enormous power that she just intuitively knows how to use, even though she has never picked up a lightsaber before, and the plot simply takes us from there. Her abilities extend to whatever the plot needs to happen without explaining why or how. As a result, she is a near untouchable character who can force heal even though she has never been trained, fight like a Jedi Master even though her training lasted all of one day, and somehow knows everything she needs to know without reading a single Jedi tome. Female characters lately have been written with an enormous amount of power without ever having earned it. Characters like Photon and Echo, who came into their powers through lazy writing and derelict storytelling, expect the audience to believe that they can suddenly use their powers without ever having training and just by intuitively knowing what to do and how to do it. By the way, Echo's abilities are maybe some of the laziest storytelling I have ever seen in a Marvel production, and given everything we've seen in the last 5 years, that's saying something. And don't even get me started on She-Hulk suddenly knowing how to control her rage when it took Bruce years and years to master it, at the cost of a great amount of pain and guilt and grief if he didn't. It's what makes the times he is able to control it, and the character moments that much more powerful and meaningful. Jen Walters skips right through the growing pain and character-defining moments to the end of the story, where she quite literally tells audiences that they should like her no matter what. And as it turns out, no matter what also means that we need to like certain female characters no matter how they feel about themselves. Something I've noticed about a great many recent female characters is that they operate within two spheres of influence. The first is a great deal of power. They are literally the most powerful person in the room, bar none, and no one can match them stroke for stroke. And the other is their absolute status as a victim of the world and society. A person who has always been looked down on, without reason or cause, simply for either being a woman or being weak or some other lazy reason. These characters clearly have a great deal of skill and spunk and resources. Their circumstances really aren't that bad, all things considered, and yet we're expected to believe that they suffer for some reason because the plot has written outside perspectives to look down on them. Whether those outside perspectives are the patriarchy, past trauma, or some sort of ancestral background, the writing demands that the audience feel sorry for them, which oftentimes doesn't work. With characters like Vi from Arcane, someone whose circumstances are very low on the economic hierarchy, it might be easy to see her as a victim at first, but the show goes out of its way to ensure that the audience knows that Vi is not, simply because of the things and people she still has around her. And that's the difference between a victim and an underdog. An underdog we can root for. We've been rooting for underdogs in movies for years and years. Someone who fights through their awful circumstances, doesn't have a horrible attitude to match, and comes out on top. But with the characters we have been given, particularly the females, even when they are winning, there is still the victim mentality that hangs around them that we are expected to believe. These are insane and contrived attempts at stirring up sympathy, which just makes the character feel pathetic instead of inspiring. The lack of inspiration is another reason why the writing for these characters is so bad. There are no defining character moments for them, no times that feel authentic and meaningful enough for the audience to stand up and cheer. Instead, we are supposed to take inspiration from the fact that the main characters never change, or worse, realize that they were perfect all along. One of my favorite animated Disney movies is The Princess and the Frog that came out in 2009. I've referenced this movie before, but Tiana is probably the best character that Disney has created, if not, then at least in the top 5. She doesn't have a fairy godmother or any magic to help her. Her circumstances are less than ideal, and she lives at a time when discrimination was a lot more prevalent than it is today. Instead of allowing that to lead her into a victim-like mindset that does not provide any inspiration for the audience, Tiana was raised by her mother and father to work hard, and so instead of stating what she wants like so many other princesses, Tiana's mantra is, I will get what I want through hard work and determination.
I remember Daddy told me fairy tales can come true. You gotta make them happen. It all depends on you.
It's an incredibly simple message, but so rare in stories with characters that whine and cry about their circumstances and never really change. Yes, Tiana experiences moments of doubt and hardship. She certainly doesn't have the advantages that her friend Lottie does, who is another character that I adore, by the way. But she refuses to let anything that happens to her in the movies stop her from getting the life that she wants. And along the way, even though she isn't looking for love, she finds it anyway, and is changed as a result. Tiana doesn't browbeat the audience with her low economic status, or use the fact that she's a woman of color in a tenser time period to get us to feel sorry for her. She just rolls up her sleeves and gets to work. And it's so refreshing to see just how simple inspiration in characters like this can be that we just don't see anymore. Instead, we're supposed to be inspired by stories of self-actualization, which is probably the laziest way to tell a character story that I can think of. The trope of, you were perfect all along, you just needed to realize it, is so absurd that it was initially hilarious and now it's just tiring because it's been done to death. A character never needing to change, and their entire story is them and others figuring out just how awesome they are, is probably the epitome of narcissism. And it's not a story. Stories take the audience on a journey. Stories make the audience feel things for the character. Stories aren't supposed to inspire apathy, boredom, or frustration, but the writing for these female characters has done exactly that. I'd like to be clear when I say that it's not powerful females that I have a problem with. It's how they use the power that they have. Many of them are spiteful about their own power, treat it carelessly, and even sometimes use it to hurt others. This would be acceptable if these characters were villains, but many times they are written to be protagonists and heroes, and it simply doesn't work. There is a difference between spite and service. I am all for a female character using the power that they have, but I like it even better when it is in defense and in the service of others. Éowyn fighting the Witch King to stop him from killing her beloved uncle, Mulan joining the army to spare her aging father from an early death, and of course, Rita Vertasky sacrificing herself so Bill Cage can kill the alien in order to end the war. It is far more inspiring, far more real, far more impactful when a female character, or any character really, uses their gifts and talents, or just sheer determination, to help protect others. Stories of sacrifice and service will always be more interesting and more long-lasting than stories of spite and power for power's sake, or stories of self-fulfillment. And despite the apparent desire of Hollywood and other entertainment mediums to tell stories with female voices, this problem is not widely understood to be a problem. Can it be fixed? Of course it can. But the understanding of what makes a good female character, or any character, needs to come after they take these characters off of the pedestals that they have put them on and start treating them like real people with real reactions. Bring back virtue in all characters, but particularly the women who have been written not to have it lately, and then we can get back to the business of inspiring storytelling, because that is what all of us really want after all. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and let the conversations begin. Until next time, everyone.